Um, all of Christianity is paternalistic and oppressive of women. Um, and so she had to deal with the paternalism and the misogyny from white Christian nationalism. She had to deal with with racism, and she just had to deal with I mean, they were never going to allow a black woman or any woman really to be president at this point. But she had those other strikes against her. And see, the significance of that is that uh, I don't call it Christian nationalism, it's Christo nationalism, Christo fascism, really. Um, it is, it has to be recognized as being so oppressive at its core, almost demonic in places because it's harmful. It hurts the innocent, and it could not allow someone. It could. They have such animus toward progressive folk or the so-called liberals that they had that against her as well. So she had all. They had three strikes against her, really. But but the real reality is that Christo nationalism is so, I'll say, negative. Well, most of it is evil because hurting innocent people for no reason other than you can is evil, and that evil is what kept her out of office. And what is it's the same evil that onslaught that's being used against our people and against all people of color in America today. It's all of one cloth. Are you
I'm
all
sorry,
waiting for me
before,
to say more?
thank you. Yes, can happen. Two things. Thank you for sharing the truth, which is that Christianity is very paternalistic. But I also would like to backtrack if I could. I got a question about one person who didn't get the opportunity to be introduced. Is that true? Is that true? Okay. So I have his bio, and we just gonna put you on hold for just a brief second, Doctor, because we have one other person who would like to introduce, and I'm gonna pull up his bio here. I have it right here. Um, Ready. And this person is Minister Dr. Patrick Barnes, and he is a doctor of veterinary medicine. He's the oldest of four children, and he has three younger sisters. He was born in Buffalo, New York. He's been in the DMV since he was two. Um, he says that he was influenced greatly by his grandparents, and he says that his old spirit comes from his love for God and his deep faith that are attributed to them. He went to church with his grandparents, where his spirituality was formed in both the Baptist and the Catholic church. And perhaps he may share the politics of our recent um, calling of a new pope and what that means for our world. Um, he has had many medical challenges, but he's grateful that he's been able to overcome those. Um, he has had a lot of medical challenges that he put in his bio, so I suspect that he would like to have us to know that he has overcome having been born premature and being diagnosed with an IEP. He had a delayed hand-eye coordination problem, and he persevered with extra tutors, and this helped him to improve his skills and learning. And he was encouraged by his parents to be his own advocate for the help that he needed and deserved. And he also now is living with lupus, and he believes that that has helped him to be more sensitive to others' needs. and especially in helping others with illnesses of any kind. He attributes his deep spirituality to the areas of healing and practicing medicine and his love for animals. Um, Animals give him peace and inner joy, and he believes that his work in treating pets also helps people. He uses his own dog to assist in prayer days, and he believes that God works through all kinds of avenues to help reach God's people. Um, he is a graduate of uh, Howard University School of Divinity, but he holds a Bachelor of Science in Laboratory Animal Science from North Carolina A&T. Again, he has a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Tuskegee University School of Veterinary Medicine. And he graduated from Howard in 2023. He was an intern at Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ, and he continues to serve there. And it says here that he also has a Master's of Theology from Xavier University in Louisiana. So I'm gonna stop right there. And thank you so much for coming, because I know that your plate always runs over too. So thank you so much.
Again, my apologies to Minister Patrick. And so let me just make sure that are we streaming or we're just recording it? Because
Yeah, it appears. Yeah, it appears that we're just recording. Sorry.
okay. All right. So the next question, if we could move forward. Thank you so much, Dr. Hendricks, for enlightening us with what you said and giving us a new term to use. So why did Black men reject Vice President Kamala Harris? Is the next question that we want to consider. And I don't want to say make it appear as if all Black men rejected supporting Vice President Kamala Harris, but why did some of the others or large numbers reject supporting her as president? Um, Anybody can answer that.
I think the problem is jealousy. And the reason why I think it's jealousy is because I have been talking to certain men folk, and they're convinced that Black women has the advantage over Black men. They said a Black woman can get a job sooner. They can do all these other things before uh, uh, a Black man can do those things. And also, there was another concern that has to do with the misogyny. People they don't like necessarily women are having been a part of the LGBTQ community now for 50 years. And it's this constant ongoing battle between films and bitch bushes and all that, all that going on. All those, and then it's just it may be best as I finish the dominant people, whoever the dominants are, they have a way of convincing the oppressed that if they can oppress somebody else, they'll be less oppressed. I've been studying whiteness since the beginning of the year, just concept of whiteness, and how when this country was set up, the landed gentry, it was set up similar to what had happened in Europe. They had the landed gentry and the serfs. And then what they did when they set up the country here, the landed gentry sent people over. They sent one of their people over to build over them. And they set up a whole system here. And so they've convinced white people. Lyndon Johnson said this: that if you convince a white, the lowest of white people that they're better than the greatest of black people, then you can get it in their pockets. So in fact, you may be able to get, they may give in their pockets and give you the money out of their pockets. So as I leave, as I finish talking, Dr. James Tenney taught me first thing. He said, the essence of sin itself is self-centered pride. And if you can get into somebody's self-centeredness and their pride, you can pretty well do whatever you want to do with them. Just keep boosting them. Even I keep saying I'm stopping, but I got turned on. Even with the president right now, the person who we have as president right now, people don't understand that that's a mentally ill person, a seriously mentally ill person. It's not the politics of him. He has dark triad, according to my sources, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and pathology. He's all that, a mentally ill person. But he's able to convince them that they're better than other people. I'm gonna shut up now.
No, you made some great points. I think the real question is why are we so easily convinced, or why are we so easily persuaded? But we won't go there. Anybody else want to answer why you think Black men rejected Vice President Kamala Harris?
Well, I will dive into it. One of the things is, and I believe it's beyond jealousy. I was raised with alpha males, and they believe in giving their wife so much freedom. And I believe, and I might be wrong, but I believe that there was a little bit more than male chauvinist and misogyny is that a black male is just not at the place consciously, mentally, or spiritually to have a woman over them. And I believe some black men just believe that a woman still in 2025 only belongs in these certain pockets. And Kamala Harris, the diva, she was everything, and she didn't take any stuff. And I believe very much men's was intimidated by her because she was not a stupid woman. She was a brilliant woman. So I think it's a combination of that the black males and what my brother said is that pride is that I'm not going to have a woman over me. And I've seen it in a church that I used to attend where a woman pastor was going to be elevated, and the men shut it down. No, they're not going to do it. And I believe in 2025, we still have that consciousness. So that's one of the reasons why I believe that the rejection of some, because I definitely voted for it. So not all of us, but I believe that just not ready.
Dr. Hendricks.
Let me just say one thing. So I think all of that plays a part. But I think
Okay.
for a lot of black men that I spoke with, one of the things that they really resented was the fact that she married a white man. And nobody wants to talk about this issue. But they, many of the younger African American males I spoke with resented the fact, and some resentment goes a long way, resented the fact that when she shows up kissing a white man, holding up a white man, many black men felt the way about it. I come from a small town in Virginia, a place called Hopewell, Virginia, and when I talked with some of the men who said that they were not going to vote for him. And let's be clear, the uptick in black men voting for her was no more than the uptick of men who voted for the person that we have in the White House now. So it wasn't like she ran rampant with the number of black men voting for her. For those who didn't vote for her, didn't vote for her for a number of reasons, and one was particularly for those of us who come from from the South and grew up in a very much a segregated environment. It wasn't that she was a woman. It was the fact that she was a woman who married a black man. I mean, married a white man. And that kicked up some dust for them.
Thank you
I think that's,
for, go ahead.
yeah, I wonder if Dr. Say,
I believe that he has hit on something. I still believe that Obama would not have won had he been married to a white woman. I think the black women really did like the fact that Miss Michelle Obama had the same hair problems, had her concerns. I put it that way that they did, and everything, and that's just from uh, being in rural Tennessee, where I'm from rural Tennessee, and they did not like they liked Obama because his wife was black.
thank you, Elder Brown. Dr. Hendricks, could you weigh in for us, please?
No, I don't really have anything different to say. I think I think, well, other than, Trump had something to do with that, in that his sick, hyper macho, full masculine act, you know, attracted some brothers, particularly some young brothers, because they said he's tough, and like the hip hop guys, like the fact that he's got all the gaudy stuff at his house, and he's got all the money and all that. So it wasn't all a rejection of Kamala. Some of it was just that he had that cowboy thing, like a colleague of mine wrote Jesus and John Wayne. Well, Trump had that cowboy thing going, and some of these I'd like to call them knuckleheads were attracted to that, because you heard some of the rappers talking like, yeah, I'm all for Trump. These brothers had they didn't pay a dime's worth of attention to the issues, but they just liked the way that Trump told people off, and that way he was nasty, and he would hit right back and all that. It's so I guess to sum it up, it's there's this real pathology of young in a stratum of young men, and they are going to continue to be misogynistic, and it's very tragic. But I don't know how that can be reversed with them. I mean, with all that we see black women doing, and women in general doing in this society, and they're still talking that stupid stuff at this point. It's really damning and alarming.
Just a real quick comment, a personal experience. Speaking to a friend, I guess politics can, sometimes break up friendships or cause strains in friendships. But I remember asking a friend if who were they going to vote, and they said, well, who are you going to vote for? And I was like, who am I going to vote for? And he said Trump. And he was like, what? He said, you're going to vote for Trump? And I was like, did you really, really say that just now? And so we ended up engaging in a conversation about, her capability of leading the country. And, he talked about how women were too emotional. And, Trump, he acts like a 3-year-old. So I don't know what are weird that belief that I would consider voting for Trump, because I would think that he would be more qualified and more able to lead the country than her. This person, is one of, I think, 5 brothers. So, their experience with women is different than others who grew up with women. But even those whose experience with women, still have some of these same beliefs. I'm an educator, and I've been an educator K through 12, and then even in community college, and even young kids I see, you know, they even engage and embrace sexism. I see it in the classroom. And I've had some people say, "Oh, that's cute that they call you Miss Dr. Butt." But I stop them every time because I ask them, I say, if I was a man, would you say Mr. Dr. Butts? I said, no. I said, because what you're doing, and I explain it to them, is you're diminishing. And I talk to second graders just like they can understand because they can understand. They do. I said, do you understand? Do you understand? I don't need to have Miss attached onto my name. It's just doctor. If I was a man, you would never think about calling that person Mr. Doctor, whatever. I said, but you think that women are different, but not different in a good way. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. So it starts from a very young age. Little black boys and little brown boys too are considered to be little princes and little kings. And that's okay, except you have queens that walk alongside, not behind the king, but alongside the king. And so we, even as women, have got to raise our children in ways that they understand equality.
Thank you for that. And I wholeheartedly agree. The next question, I think you kind of led us into that. How does church politics impact women in leadership roles? Church politics.
I'll jump.
How does that work? Would you repeat that, please?
Okay, so how does church politics impact women in leadership roles?
Is that a real question?
Well, that's the one I was given to say, so yes.
I mean, it's church politics. Yeah. Well, the problem with the church with regard to women, I mean, our churches are are to such a great extent under control of culture, when it should be more under control of Christ, that it reflects all the ills of the right of the society. Right. The problem is that we have scriptures that are paternalistic, misogynistic, like First Timothy and all that. And we have such a high degree of biblical illiteracy that folk, actually think that this is the word of God. When it's the misogyny, Ephesians and Colossians and the pastorals, they contradict Jesus' interaction with women, and Paul had to say in his authentic letters, right? And that's so it's almost an intractable problem as long as our folk, and including our pastors, aren't really thoughtfully biblically literate. And as long as we have all this, as long as we subscribe to this word of God ideology, I mean, the Bible is the word of God. Well, Luke didn't say that he was writing his gospel because God told me. He said he thought it was a good idea. It's doesn't take anything away from the Bible, but word of God is an ideology, which says that the Bible should not be questioned, right? And this plays, when we talk about misogyny, I mean, this plays right into the misogynist hands. So as long as we have patriarchy, we're going to have people using the Bible to buttress their misogyny and their oppression of women. And of course, in other instances of gay folk and even of children.
Yes, absolutely. And as you were talking, reminded me, and you said a lot. Hopefully, people will process it or go back and watch it 2 or 3 times. But it reminded me of when I used to teach Pauline epistles at Ashland Seminary in Detroit. People come in, the students that were the ministers have their opinions about Paul's writings, but I had to remind them that Paul is writing from his own perspective. And so you highlight an excellent point that this is not God's words, because Paul often says, I would not. And so therefore, he is speaking of what he would do, his own desires and what he's been taught. So I think, you gave us a lot to think about.
Yeah, may I just elucidate something because a lot of people aren't aware. Biblical scholarship made it clear that Paul did not write First, Second Timothy, and Titus, right? In fact, it's not even called the letters of Paul now; it's just called the pastoral letters. And Ephesians and Colossians the same. It's clear that Paul did not write them, and that's why I said what I said. May I just say this? I recommend to everybody. There's a book that is very readable. It's called The First Paul by Borg, Borg, and Crossan, right? Crossan, The First Paul. Man, it explains Paul so beautifully and so well. It's not polemical, it's not ideological, and it's very readable. My students love it. And so I just want to recommend that. And folk who like haven't been to seminary or whatever, they can see why, we say those letters aren't written by Paul. Mhm.
Awesome. The first Paul. So we want to make sure we put that out somewhere, Dr. Bugs. Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, Minister Patrick.
I want to say thank you all for having me and for this introduction, and honor to be here with all the wonderful speakers. I would also like to follow up with this issue in the church in terms of you all mentioning culture, that the church, much like culture, sometimes passes down bad habits. And so I think if young people, men see patriarchy and the preachers that are before them mistreat women, use their gifts, use their talents, but never give them honor, never pay them their worth, never give them leadership goals, and allow them to be their full, authentic self. They
Mhm.
repeat the same thing. And so I
Mhm.
think, like you all said, in culture, the church sometimes mimics larger society and passes down those same bad habits. And upcoming young men see that and repeat it.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, some young ladies see that and say, hey, I just stay in the background and
Mhm.
seen and not heard. And that's
Mhm.
what's expected. And the church doesn't change if that cycle is repeated.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But can I say there's something there needs to be, and what we don't do is deal with the mental health issues that exist in the church. For example, I've always, if we want more women being in church, I think men in the church have got to be intentional about making sure that women are in leadership in the church.
Mhm.
Um, and but what I've learned in pushing for more women, because I say it all the time, I've got enough men. I want some more women in leadership in the church, and it's the women who attack me
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
first and foremost. It's the women who come after me, and some women have even left
Mhm.
because of their experiences with women in other places. And so there is this internalized, and I don't like to use the word hatred, internalized dislike for women in the church,
Mhm.
if in fact they elevated to a leadership role. And some of my greatest fights were with women in my church when I have invited other women to the church and have put them in leadership role, like on the ministerial team or like in other places, and give them once I assess their skills. So what I find is that that it's one of the issues that we really need to address. Mental health issues, mental health is what we really need to address in the Black church, particularly mental health, period. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that is some of this internalized dislike that we experience with one another.
Well, you said internalized. I think that's really important because I think of my mother. My mother said, I love to hear women preach. I love to hear women preach. But I'm sorry, I just can't see having a woman pastor. You know, this internalized patriarchy. There are a lot of, like in my classes, I would show them how First Timothy, women be quiet, shouldn't be in leadership and all that. I would show them that this is not something that should govern the church. And women were the ones who would get angry about that. And when I deal the household code, I said, well, the women saying that, many men say the man has to be the head of the household, and they go to Ephesians, Colossians, and I explained to them that kind of hierarchy is not consistent with the gospel. The women would get mad. I want the man to be the head. So yeah, Brother King, you're right. I mean, that's a very, very good point. Very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate what both of you said. In my book, there were a number of exits that I made, and those exits were made because some people will stay and suffer the abuse. Some people will do that. So you have a choice, as a woman in ministry, when abuse comes your way. And for me, you know, I I I I I I listen to God, I talk to leadership, I assess what's going on, and then I make a decision. I make a decision to come, I make a decision to leave. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge God, and God will direct your path. I'll let God direct my path. And you know what? My ancestors didn't stay around for the abuse. They got the first boat out of Georgia and went back to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that in my soul. You ain't gonna hit on me, abuse me. I'm just using those terms and think I'm gonna stay around for it. I ain't gonna do that. I'm gonna get my stuff and leave. Now some folks gonna stay there, but not me. Not
Yeah.
me. There's too many other places. Besides, I can do bedside Baptist. I've done it. I will do it. I will do bedside Baptist.
Okay.
I will do it.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Minister Patrick?
Yep. To kind of piggyback and segue the last few wonderful comments everybody said is I think digging down deeper, the enslavement really did a number on us as a people. And one of the things like Reverend Kenneth talked about, Dr. Butts talked about, is how much hate and abuse we have internally, and how much we push that against each other, and how that plays out in the church. The church for people of color is one of the few things right now still not running owned maybe directly by corporations, and so that power control dynamic trickles down, and we fight and pin against each other for a little bit of power and control in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Dr. Wallace, Henry, I was going to come to you.
Okay, I knew you were coming, but I wanted to just put my hand out there.
Right.
When I'm gonna say when I first saw the topic, the first thing that dropped that I thought about was just the systematic misogyny that is so interwoven in church, politics, and society. And I go back to what Dr. Hendricks said. When I heard the first two questions, it's almost, it rang the same for me, because I think the same issues that impact our political decisions, many started from how we received information about the hierarchy of gender from church. And it is so multi-layered in terms of the issues. Heard Dr. King talking about just the internalized attacks that he's gotten from the women, and I think there was a narrative that was out that led within the politics with Kamala Harris that just it wasn't just one thing, it was several things, and one of them that is pervasive is that women are not going to be able taken seriously because they're not going to be able to handle the stress of. And I talked to individuals that agreed with that. I'm like, do you have a mother? Have you watched your mother? Have you watched your sister? And I think so many statements go unchecked or unchallenged. I was in an Uber arguing to the point that I was almost put out because this young man wanted to tell me I'm not going to vote for her, and his reasoning was so narrow and limited, and it came down to just being about gender, and I can't follow a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is that? And you need to ask yourself, why is that? Because someone instilled that in him, and someone also reinforced that within him. And so we have all these messages coming from home, from church, and even some from from their mothers, that you're supposed to be this. And it's not clearly defined when we talk about a man being a head of the household. It's not so much a subjugation of the woman.
Mm-hmm.
It is a partnership that they both hold in taking care of the household. And so it is, okay, in my mind, I'm gonna say just in my mind, it is, okay, it's when we talk about the 50-50, it is the give and take. You take this, you take that. And it is bumping up against these strict and rigid roles that we've had, or you're only supposed to do this, or I'm only supposed to do that. And then they get in society and hear all these conflicts about this or that. And then Reverend Buster, just real quick for you, when I got my doctorate, I think it's a education of the Black community, because many of my students still call me Mr. Dr. Henry, because they don't understand where to put the title at.
Right. Thank you so much. And Pastor Van Zandt, or Elder Van Zandt, I'll get you in 1 second. Please let me share this because I do have a dying battery on my computer. It was interesting that when I was called to pastor my Baptist church in Detroit, um, that church had a 55-year history. And I think I was only the third woman to ever be called the pastor of a Black Baptist church in the history of Detroit, Michigan. And so that says a lot right there. But it was later I found out about the vote. Y'all know about the vote. So later I found out that it was the women who said they did not want a woman pastor. The men were okay with voting for a woman pastor, and they had to talk to some of the women that were there. And that was how I was called to be the first woman pastor of this Black Baptist church in Detroit. But, the women gave me a hard time. And oftentimes when I would go and preach other places, because the men would call me as the pastor of the church to come and preach at some of their pastors' anniversaries or different things like that, it was the women who were challenged that I was coming and sitting on the pulpit with the men, or I was being invited to the pastor's office. And so, I talked a lot to other women in other spaces about we should not say you're a woman minister, you're a woman pastor. You should just say that you are a pastor, you are a minister, or you are a doctor of theology or doctor of whatever. It should not be that it has to be genderized because now there's a woman involved. And so, because I've never heard them say, this is a man pastor, this is a male pastor. And so it's always just pastor when it comes to men. So why does it have to now be a woman pastor? And so I just wanted to throw that out there to resonate with Pastor King that yes, it is usually the women. And so that's been my own experience when I was in the Baptist church. But y'all know I had to resign my position with the Baptist church when I came out in 2013. So, but that was my experience then. And so I see Pastor Van Zunt, and then we have Dr. Pastor Henry, who also is going to come back and say something else.
Yeah, my mother was a person like that. She did not like women in leadership positions. Somehow or another, she would sit there in church and look at a woman who was speaking and find out something wrong with the way she's dressed. She was not even paying attention to what she was saying, but my mother just wanted to make sure she had enough foundation garments on because they were always getting up showing something. And my sister has inherited that. She tells me all the time. She quotes on First Timothy and other things about women. My mother did not vote for the person who is now the pastor of the home church, Regional Church of God, Holiness. And she didn't vote for her. And the woman who's pastor the church is actually her daughter-in-law, my brother's wife, and my mother did not vote for her to be the pastor of the church. But what I've learned, I'm gonna say this real fast. What I've learned is that some people think that the church picks up things from the community itself. But what I have learned is that in order for a particular church to fit into that community, it has to be saying the things that people want to hear. Mm-hmm. Then the things that people want to hear, and that it's really the other way around. The community, or I say, won't fit in that particular community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing about your mother and the church there. Pastor Wallace Henry.
Yeah, I just want to jump back in and just to say we have to really promote and normalize the balanced leadership and women in roles, despite the opposition that may come up. Because when I was asked probably right after my installation, are you going to get an assistant pastor? And then it was pushed at least the first 2 years. And I was clear from the very beginning that if I have assistant pastor, it's going to be a woman because of the difference in approach, the balance that is needed. And I don't want to promote just one single gender being elevated above the other, and want to make sure that women have an opportunity to hear from other women, and that they have the opportunity to hear that perspective, and because it is unique and women operate differently from men. And I think that whole yin yang balance is important for individuals to hear different perspectives on the Word of God, on just their personal growth. There are things that you may hear better from a woman, that you may hear better from a man, and to have that balance and to promote that and say, hey, unapologetically, this is what it is. This is what it is. We have, I ended up having both a male and a female assistant pastor, but if there was going to be one, it was going to be a woman. And that was my position.
Amen.
May I ask
Amen.
you, brother? May
Well,
I
thank
just
you.
ask real quick, brother Henry? I want to be clear. What were you saying about the head of household? Were you saying that you were saying there should be a head of a that
No,
the
I think that was the narrative that
I
from
got it.
that the man is the head of household, and that's that mixed message that young men, even folks that aren't unchurched, they hold on to that little bit. They might
They
not
Yeah,
hold
do.
anything
Yes,
else,
they do.
but they'll grab that.
got you,
Yes,
got you.
they do. Yes, they do. Let me just add one other thing when we talk about the men. I've had numerous experiences where I preached and the men decided that they were going to walk out. But at the Progressive National Baptist Convention, I think I was only the third woman in the history of the convention to preach for the annual session at that point. They've had lots since that time. But that was on a Friday. First of all, they always put the woman on the Friday where they knew people were leaving. But also, this particular year, we had a president that did not support women in ministry. That was at that time Reverend Dr. T. DeWitt Smith Jr. And
Mm,
so he was not necessarily thrilled, but someone else on the committee decided to have me come and preach. And so on Thursday night, there were about 4,000 people in the room for the service. On Friday morning, which was the day that I was up to preach, I think there may have been 150 people in the room.
mm,
And so people made it very clear that
mm,
they, women and men, that they were not supporting women preaching at the annual session. And so, those types of things, were always happening. And so I do think that it's very important that men like yourselves do speak up and, continue to push women being in leadership and continue to display that you support their call and what God has anointed and appointed them to do.
I'd like to just piggyback on what you just said. I was the first woman to be ordained at First Baptist Church of Greenwood. Dr. Hendricks, I came out of the AME church. I was initially ordained in the AME church, and my parents were AMEs. And once in AME, you're always in AME. And
I'm having a hard time
however, my father
understanding
was
you.
well. My father, you having a hard time understanding me? I said
Yeah.
that I was ordained initially in the AME church. My mother was AME, and once you're an AME, you're always an AME, so to speak. Because AMEs have this proud history of being AMEs. Because of the social civic activism. At least that's how the AMEs I know act. Even I was talking
Mm,
to someone the other day that said of Alfred Street, but they said, "Oh, I'm AME," but they said, "Oh, I'm AME." And my mother was proud to be an AME. But anyway, I was the first woman to be ordained at First Baptist Church of Deanwood, and I
mm,
had the same experience that Bishop Abrams had. I was the preacher of the hour. The pastor was out, and there were all these men behind me on the ministerial staff. And
mm,
when I got ready to get up, they walked out.
mm.
And then they
Wow.
decided to come back in, and 5 people joined the church.
Mhm,
One
mhm,
was a preacher's wife, and then there were 3 others. So God has a way of showing up and showing out, when, man or woman would attempt to deny. That's
mhm,
my story. I've always been underestimated,
mhm,
always been underestimated. And God, because, in the book, I talk about how I could be in the room and you wouldn't even know I was there.
yeah.
But, it's not by power, it's not by might. God takes the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. I ain't calling women foolish. We ain't foolish.
Mhm,
But to
mhm,
other folks, foolish. So I tell you, this wasn't a book I wanted to write. It was a book that I was called to write because I'm like, why are we still talking about this? I came out the AME church. I sat on the pulpit with Reverend W. Roundtree, who was, she was an attorney, and she was one of the first women to be ordained in that second round of women. I always saw women. I was like, what's this about? I was always told that I could do whatever I wanted to do, but it was people who told me and wanted me to think I couldn't do what I wanted to do. But I was wondering, Dr. Hendricks, as an academic, it's like in terms of the politics of women being in professorial roles. Because I think it was a Reverend Elder Van Zant who wrote something about, I think her name is Beverly, I can't remember her last name, at Wesley. I think he wrote something about her and her experience as a woman professor, and I can't remember exactly. Was that you that wrote that, Elder Van Zant?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Dr. Beverly Mitchell. She was she taught theology classes, and I mentioned the fact that the men got so upset with her because she had the nerve to separate the American dream from the glory of God. They couldn't I dare she separate. Isn't America? They kept saying, isn't America the glory of God? Aren't we the promised land? And we got over into New Testament class, and we were discussing.
Something happened that she's retired now. I can't remember.
Yeah, she's retired. But
what about her though?
I was wondering, Dr. Hendricks, what's that like? Because politics are everywhere. So what's that like in terms of women getting proper soulship, as opposed to a man getting like that? I don't know if you could if you
It depends on it depends on the institution, really, because women are like here at Columbia. I mean, yeah, women. There's no glass ceiling, for women, but you, but because we know that racism and sexism, misogyny exists, when it comes to the tenure process, right? We know that somebody has gotten hurt. I can't think of anything in particular that's happened here, but I tell you, women in academia seem to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, knowledge is key, right? So I mean, these should not exist, right? Or at least be lesser than they are in society as a whole. That makes sense.
Well, yeah, I think that's why a lot of people go into academia. There's percentage-wise a greater representation of LGBTQ folks in academia than in the large society for that very reason. You don't have to conform as much and all of that. Got to conform to a certain extent, but nowhere near near as much. So yeah. You even see that in theological education too, despite the inherent conservatism, doctrinal conservatism. But yeah,
but a good old Wesley Seminary, United Methodists, those fellows in my class, they could not. Who gave her the authority to speak on this? And it was like that. And I never saw anybody respond that way to any of the men there. But they did not. She had a problem getting black men in her classes.
Well, go on to Wesley as a black woman. I want you to know, Bishop talked about her experiences at United Seminary. I want to say that it's 8 o'clock and a whole lot of ground, and I really appreciate everybody for taking the time, to engage in this discussion. I'm sorry that there were technical difficulties. I'm like over these technical. They happen every single time, and we weren't able to broadcast. But as Bishop Abrams said, there's a lot that was said that we probably need to listen to more than um, really, brother, you know, because it's really your issue. It really ain't our issue. It's your issue. So I really appreciate you grappling with it. Really do. There were some really poignant things that were said tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Hendricks, just I feel sometimes though that we still didn't really engage in, the politics of Kamala Harris. We talked about it some, but it seems like we're just still at the basic level still. We talked a lot about just the basics of, women being not seen as as human beings. I almost want to compare it to being black and creep as human. I don't know what the fraction is for us, but we're still things, and unfortunately, the isms are not going away.
Yeah.
And sexism and sexism,
Right.
ableism, they're just not going away. So I think we have to expose them and recognize that it's still there.
Exactly. And I would say one thing we didn't mention about Kamala Harris is that I was critical of her well for a long time because she has this little I think it sounds like a little silly laugh, and I think that if a man had it, I feel the same way. But the fact that as a woman, I think makes her be even more devalued, like, oh, she's a silly woman. No, she's just a person who has this, to me, is aggravating giggle, but it's not because she's weak or silly. I mean, the sister ain't weak, and she's not silly, she just has a way of doing that. But I do think that came into it. Also, the fact that she was very feminine was a problem. If she was gold in my ear, like someone like that, man, they wouldn't have any problem. They wouldn't have any problem with it. So yeah.
And that happens in the church. If you can hoop, you might be accepted a little bit more. But
if you what?
No, don't put that out there.
Don't put that out there.
What did she say?
No. She said if you can hoop, you might be accepted a little bit more. But then when you do, then people accuse you of trying to be a man.
That's
So,
true. Yeah, that's true.
that's my experience. And so I don't want to let that go out there.
No. But I'm glad you brought the other side to it. You damned if you don't. If you do hoop, you damned. If you don't hoop, you damned.
Yeah, that's true. And you'll have to dress. Well, in the AME church, and sisters I know when I was coming through the ranks, man, they look like they were in a perpetual funeral. I mean, long black skirts all the time. I mean, really, annual conference, they had on them long black skirts and the black, and I'm like, Lord have mercy, y'all scaring me. If they had, I don't know what
And
it's
there are
like now, but
and there are churches that don't want you to come in that pulpit if you don't have a skirt. I never wear a skirt. And so I always have on my pants. That's just my own liberation. And so, I need to know ahead of time if you only letting people in the pulpit with skirts on that are women, because the men surely aren't wearing any. So, I try to get that information up front, because that means I can't come, because I'm not going to change it up just to come over there. It's not going to happen.
But
No.
I want to say one thing real quickly is, and I know my time is and everything else, but I want to honor the women's in this moment. I know we're talking about all that women's is and women's not, but it had not been for the women's because me fighting my missionary Baptist church to be ordained as an open queer man, I didn't get the support from the males. My support came from the women's.
Yeah.
The women rowdy around me. When I was sitting in those 12 o'clock meetings being called a faggot and we not going to have it, it was those women who gathered around me in the parking lot and prayed for me. So I know we are talking about why women's is not there, but I'm grateful for the women's who was in that period when I was in a battle with the Missionary Baptist Church and the brothers wasn't. Now, some of those women's wasn't out in public, but how I got ordained and licensed in the Missionary Baptist is because the women's fought. So I think we have to look at the light at the end of the tunnel and know that there is some good things in the gender of male and female, and we still have a battle. In our denomination, which is Unity Fellowship Church Movement, now we have 3 women bishops, and that has made a difference. So I just wanted to add that because don't want to end like we are not progressing. We're progressing, but we're not progressing as fast as people want it is. And I just wanted to add that before we got off.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you all to excuse me. I'm going to have to run. I have to catch a flight.
We're gonna all leave because it's 8 o'clock. Thank you everyone for coming and
Thank you.
Thank you.